So thank you all for coming here this evening. I had planned to have a fabulous PowerPoint presentation, but it's not working, and that's totally fine, because we can manage without it. The last talk I did, I did not have PowerPoint either. And so my name is Reverend Joanna Bartlett, and I am here to give you a talk about healing from loss. Yes. So my first plan was to introduce myself, who I am, why I'm qualified to actually be talking to you about loss and healing from loss. So I am an ordained minister with the National Spiritualist Association of Churches, which is not affiliated in any way with the Center for Spiritual Living, which is kind enough to host me and allow me to have these talks and have a support group here in this building. And I'm also a certified grief recovery specialist with the Grief Recovery Institute. I'm also a Reiki master because I'm one of those people that wants to help other people heal in whatever way I can. I've always had that urge to help and heal other people, and many of the people that I work with are also kind of the helpers and healers of the world, and we're the ones that often want to try and figure out, eventually we want to try and figure out, how do we heal from our own losses? How do we, we accumulate so much loss, but how do we actually move through it and move on from it? I also teach personal growth and spiritual development classes. Mostly I do this online. And I'm also somebody that has experienced kind of a whole lot of loss in their lifetime and has struggled to figure out how to deal with it and how to heal from it and move on from it and not have it continually affect me. So what is loss exactly? When we talk about loss, there's two things that people most often think of when they think of loss or of grief. And do you know what those two things are?
Death.
Yeah? What's the other one?
Divorce.
Yeah, there you go. Yay, gold stars. So there's definitely losses, right? We're not saying there's not losses. There's definitely major losses. But there's also like 40 other losses that people experience throughout their lifetime. So some of these, I have a list over here, so that's what they are. So there's the death of somebody that you didn't get along with, somebody that you had a difficult relationship with. Is there, can you think of anybody that, whether it was an ex-spouse or a family member or even a friend, that when they died, you still experienced loss and grief? Because all the things that you hoped perhaps were going to be healed in that relationship, they're not going to get healed, not between the two of you, having a conversation about it. Certainly that relationship isn't going to become different than it was. Moving, especially as a child, as an adult too, but this loss often occurs kind of most often as a kid if you moved, because kids don't really get told what's going on a lot of the time, and they're often not given the tools to help them process the things that they experience. And so it may be, hey, we're moving, we're going, even if it's in the same town, how often do you get to go back to your old house that you were used to, which was perhaps the only house you ever knew? You generally don't, even if your parents, promise you you're going to get to go visit your old friends or something. They talk about how it's going to be good, how you shouldn't feel bad about it, but that loss is still a loss. Career changes can be a source of loss, whether that is getting fired or being laid off, or even retiring. If your career is something where you really identify with, having that change can be a loss for you. I know that when I was laid off from a job that I loved 5.5 years ago now, it took me probably a good 2 years to feel okay about myself again. And I knew intellectually, I knew it wasn't about me. I knew it was about, organizational charts, the boxes, and I was a box, and my box got moved to Vancouver, and I wasn't moving to Vancouver. But still, it was a really painful loss for me. Financial changes are another kind of loss that we experience, whether that's an increase in our finances or a decrease in our finances, because an increase in our finance can come about because of a variety of things. It could be because we get a new job and we work more, and so we have kind of losses in other ways, or we have a windfall, say, because a parent dies and you receive an inheritance. It can still be a loss. It can also be this kind of weird loss that your identity and sense of self has shifted. And certainly if your finances decrease, that can be a whole bunch of different kinds of losses you experience. The breakup of a romantic relationship. is a loss. And even the ending of a friendship. If you have a good friend that friendship ends up ending, it becomes a loss for you. The death of a pet is a loss, and it's one that I think goes largely kind of unrecognized and certainly for the kind of the long term in our society. You know, somebody's beloved furry friend dies, and there's kind of that initial like, oh, I'm so sorry, that's really hard. And then it's like, aren't you over it already? Like, it was just a pet. It wasn't like it was a person. But it's real loss. Those are real relationships. That's real love that goes on in that kind of relationship. Loss of health is another loss that we end up can feel grief due to, because when you have some kind of, you know, loss of health event in your life, you have certain expectations of your body and your life. You have hopes and dreams, and having a walking physical body in whatever capacity is part of doing that. And so if something happens and you no longer are able to do those things, or it seems like you're not going to be able to, that's a real loss that you experience. Sexual assault is another loss, and it's one that we've started talking more about, fortunately, I think. Because it's a loss that we need to address. It's loss of safety, loss of trust, loss of control of your body. It's a huge loss that many people experience and don't have the resources to really be able to heal from. And then pretty much anything you experience in childhood, anything to do with children can be a loss, actually. Even having a child can be a loss, because it's a loss of freedom. Even if it's a child that you really, really want to have in your life. When my first child was born, so happy about it. It was a wonderful experience. And I remember feeling a sense of loss that the life that I had, I couldn't have that anymore. I had this being who I adored, like attached to me at all times, or within like, you know, short driving distance, because I had to keep feeding him. And for somebody who's very independent and likes to go do stuff by themselves, having this other person like so dependent upon me, there was a sense of loss for that for me. And then childhood trauma, that, you know, loss of safety, loss of control of your body, loss of trust, loss of identity, loss of connection, perhaps with your family, all the things that what you may experience or may have experienced as a child are all losses. And as you came in, you got that fun grief questionnaire, because that's a fun thing to complete. Let's talk about all the painful things you may have experienced. They're on the back table.
Okay.
All the things you might have experienced that are losses, that you may not be aware are losses, because, like you said, when you think of loss, you think death and divorce, and not all of these other things that are not to compare loss, right? Because all loss, when you feel it, is loss, and they're real things that really affect you. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about my story and some of the losses that I've experienced, and and how I have learned to heal from those. Partly to illustrate a point, and also so that you know that. I guess I know what I'm talking about when it comes to loss, and I've been through it, and I know the way through it. I've gone through it, and I can guide other people through it now. I can hold the light and say, "Follow me. This is how we go." So these are the slide for this says the unresolved emotional wounds from my childhood. They're no longer unresolved, mostly. So when I was young, when I was 4, my parents divorced, and I keep forgetting my own losses. When I was 2, my older brother died. When I was 4, my parents divorced. When I was 7, I was sexually assaulted. My dog at some point in there was rehomed. I think the dog was rehomed. I'm honestly not completely sure if the dog was like, I was told that Trixie got sent to the farm, and I'm still not sure if that's a euphemism or not, if Trixie really did go to the farm, which I'm hoping is true. I'm not going to ask at this point. My mom was depressed as a result of my parents' divorce, and that was a loss for me in the sense that I did not have the parent that I needed to have during that time. My stepmom didn't particularly want children, even though she married somebody that had 2 children. go figure. And so that for me was a loss because I wanted to have that relationship with her. I wanted that warm, loving, step-parental relationship. I wanted to call her mom and she wouldn't let me. And so that was a loss for me as a little kid. And my dad, who had lost a child kind of a few years prior, and now, after having done this work and really spent some time with it, I can go, oh, okay, yeah, I can kind of see, like, maybe he had a little bit of unresolved loss. He had 2 divorces and a child that had died. Maybe he had some stuff that made him not be able to be emotionally available for me, to be what I needed as a kid. I had a couple grandparents die during that period of time. I moved to another country when I was 10. I left England and I moved to Barbados with my mom. And that ended up being the loss of country for me. I really felt exiled from my home because I had only been back to England a handful of times since I left. And so I felt like I lost my home. In Barbados, unfortunately, I experienced a lot more sexual assault and abuse and harassment during the 4 years that I lived there, so there was repeated losses there. I also had bullying at school, loss of friendship, loss of reputation. We had financial issues, so we had a decrease in our finances, and that was difficult. And then I experienced difficulty in my relationship with my mom. I ended up experiencing physical neglect from her, because an emotional neglect, because she was not around, and I essentially lived on my own at age like 13, 14. Then we moved to another country again, so we ended up in the US, and I had again lost my home and lost my country. I was in a car accident when I was 16, I think. I'm always a little bit fuzzy on the year. I think I was 15 or 16. I was in a car accident and we were rear-ended, and I ended up having 3 bulging discs in my back. And so that was a loss of health for me and a loss of kind of my hopes, dreams, expectations for what I was going to be able to do. I was like a grocery bagger. That was my first like real employment, official employment. Couldn't do that anymore. I was in too much pain. So that was a loss. Had my romantic breakups, throughout my teen years. And I know we say they're puppy love. But those, some of those relationships were real to me. Like, that was my first true love, was one of those. And those were kind of a succession of losses that I experienced. My cat died, Weasel, and my cat died on Christmas Eve, just to make it super sad. My cat died on Christmas Eve when I was 15. And then when I was 17, I was diagnosed with fibromyalgia and/or chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome. So I had another loss of health and a loss of like kind of my hopes and dreams for the future, what I thought my life was going to be like. I didn't know if I was going to be able to have children or work or kind of function as a human being. And so all of that was before I was 18 years old. And what happened, and the reason I'm telling you this, is because you experienced, your own losses, whether it was in childhood or in, young adulthood or whatever, you've experienced losses, or if you wouldn't be here right now. You wouldn't be interested in learning about this. Those losses were unresolved when I got to that point of, adulthood, and presumably what I was doing with my life. Because I hadn't been taught how to deal with any of these losses. And we do. I just piled on all this baggage, right? We talk about baggage, like emotional baggage. This person has too much baggage. I have too much baggage. Because we do, it really is weight that we bear, that we have these things, these losses that we've experienced. And when we don't know how to resolve them, they just accumulate, they just pile on, and we continue to drag them around with us because we don't know what else to do. We can't seem to really put them down. So this brings me to grief, kind of the definition of grief, because I'm a certified grief recovery specialist, and we talk about grief and my program's a grief support group. And grief is really just about loss. Grief is the normal and natural reaction to loss of any kind. Any kind of loss that happens, you will probably feel some amount of grief around it, and it is completely normal. And that's an important thing for you to know. You're supposed to feel grief. You're supposed to feel bad when difficult things happen to you in your life. There is nothing wrong with that. That is a completely human thing. If you didn't feel not good inside when someone or something you love dies, like that wouldn't be okay. That would be strange. That would be, we're supposed to feel, but feeling is part of the human experience. Grief, the definition that the Grief Recovery Institute uses is the conflicting feelings that are caused when a familiar pattern of behavior changes or ends. So basically, when something you're used to changes or ends, grief is what you feel as a result of that. And often there's conflicting feelings that you feel. So, for instance, I like to use my life as an example, and fortunately, Grief Recovery Institute's cool with that. So when my mom died, I don't remember how many years ago, a while ago, 7 years ago, something like that, I felt loss. I felt a huge amount of loss because my mom wasn't alive anymore. And I also felt a certain amount of relief. Not just that she wasn't in pain, because, that was good. I was glad that she wasn't in pain. Also the relief that I didn't have to take care of her anymore, that she wasn't having a long, extended downhill, descent into her body no longer working. And also kind of some relief that I didn't have to deal with her anymore, because we continued to have ups and downs in our relationship, but certainly difficult things in our relationship throughout, my adult life. Into my adult life, the stuff from my childhood, it never got resolved. I tried, mostly by having like screaming matches when I moved back in with her when I was in my 20s, but, or by ignoring it. But we tried, we didn't know how, and I could never figure out how to shift that dynamic so that it could be healthy and feel good. And so when she died, I didn't have to deal with that anymore. So those are conflicting feelings, right? They're all completely normal, natural feelings to have. I don't think I'm a terrible person because a little bit of me was relieved that I'm like, okay, well, pressure's off there now. And also there's the grief around, now I'm never going to get the chance to fix this part of my relationship with my mom and have a great relationship, the relationship I believe that we should be able to have. And so there's grief there too. Another definition of grief that the Grief Recovery Institute likes to use is that it is the feeling of reaching out for someone who's always been there, only to find when you need them again, they're no longer there. And that, I think, is especially pertinent for loved ones who have died.
Can you repeat that one more time? Thank you.
So grief is the feeling of reaching out for someone who's always been there, only to find when you need them again, they're no longer there.
Yeah. Okay. So,
the reason that I went into adulthood with my messy load of grief baggage is that I didn't know how to deal with it. Nobody taught me how to deal with it. And I suspect that the same is true pretty much for all of us. I haven't actually met anybody yet who's like, oh yes, I was taught how to deal with grief. I completely processed everything that happened and everybody around me was so kind and understanding at all times. I don't know anybody, but actually I would love to meet people who have experienced that. That would be excellent. Because we're unprepared to deal with loss. The things that we are taught to do, how to deal with loss and grief. And they're often things that we're taught not intentionally. That we learn from the people around us. We learn from our parents, we learn from our caregivers, our teachers, and people in society. The things that we're taught aren't actually useful. Because most of what people tell us and say after we experience loss is not helpful. There was a study done, and I need to actually go look up who the study was done by, because I like to know these things, not just, there was a study, because it's not good enough for me. But some, I'm sure, reputable people did a study about the things that people heard within about 72 hours after a loss occurred. And there were, I don't remember the numbers, so percentages. So guess what percentage of things people heard that was helpful? 0, we got 0, we've got 2. You guys are even more pessimistic to me. It was actually 15%. We've managed 15% of helpful things to say after people experience loss. 85% though of things that people heard within 72 hours after loss was not helpful, did not help them heal in any way. So you probably know some of those comments. You probably heard some of those comments yourself. You may have said some of them. I know before I learned this stuff, I've said these things too. And the things, like the ways, things I've said to people I love, even my own kids. I'm like, oh gosh. You know, hey, it's okay. So, you know, people say things like, be glad of the time that you had together, right? She's not in pain anymore. They're in a better place now. It was God's plan. Be grateful you can have another child. People really say these things.
I know I did.
And we do this, and I'll include myself in this because I know I've done this, because we want to be helpful. And we don't know how to be helpful because we haven't been taught how to be helpful, because we weren't given any of the tools ourselves to use to share with people. So some of the things that we were taught in terms of how to deal with grief that are not helpful. So the Grief Recovery Institute, they have this analogy that I love, that I always share with everybody, because they say, okay, say I came into this room and we want to give this center a new paint job, and I bring you a can of paint, because we need the paint to do it, a hammer, a saw, and a screwdriver. And I say, paint this room. How would you do that? My inventive self goes, well, I'd take the screwdriver and I'd use that to pop the lid off the paint can. And then I guess I use my hands, maybe we throw some at the wall, we smear it around, we'll get the job done, right? And those are the tools that we're given essentially to heal from grief. Or they're just the wrong tools. It's like they are what they are, they don't do the job that we need them to do. And so it's not your fault if you make a huge mess trying to paint the room with inadequate tools or tools that aren't meant for the job. It is what it is. So some of these tools, some of these myths that we're taught about dealing with grief that we learn in our childhoods, often from our parents. The first one is don't feel bad. Right? Something happens. I know I've done this one to my kids. Had a bad day at school, somebody wouldn't talk to them, somebody wouldn't play with them, teacher said something unkind or uncaring. Oh, don't feel bad. Do you want some hot chocolate? Here, have a cookie, right? Don't feel bad. Do this thing instead. And I've meant it sincerely. I don't want my kid to feel bad. I don't want somebody I care about to feel bad. But when something hard happens, and I realize, a thing happening at school isn't the same as your grandmother died, but we do the same thing. Regardless, we do the same thing. We don't want them to feel bad. They're going to feel bad. And both of those things can be true. Another one is to replace the loss. And this happens in all kinds of ways. It happens in jobs, happens in relationships, happens with pets. For me, when my beloved cat Weasel died on Christmas Eve, that sad, sad Christmas Eve, I was the one that wanted to replace the loss. It wasn't, sometimes it will be a parent who says, oh, don't feel bad, we'll go get another cat, another dog on Sunday, right? In my case, it was like, I feel bad, I don't want to feel bad, I want another cat right now. And so I went and got another cat, and her name was Hobbs. I was loved the comic Calvin and Hobbes. So even though Hobbs was female, she was an orange tiger, so she had to be Hobbs. But I didn't really connect with Hobbs. It took me a really long time, actually, until I got yet another cat, to connect with Hobbs and to really appreciate her, because Hobbs wasn't Weasel. I couldn't replace Weasel with another cat. I tried, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. Mm-hmm. The third thing that we learn is to grieve alone. One of the things I heard in childhood certainly was, laugh in the world lost with you cry alone, right? You're gonna cry, I'm gonna give you something to cry about if you want to cry. And I did very much get that, British stiff upper lip kind of upbringing. But I was told, and some things that we learn from our parents are, we just kind of pick up. We see that this is how they react to grief. Their parent dies, an uncle, aunt dies. How do they deal with it? That's how we learn. And sometimes it really is very overt. And some of for me, the whole, grief alone is like, if you're gonna go cry in a room. Nobody wants to be around you if you're whining. Some things we're told very overtly, and some things we aren't. But we do learn that, we want, if we want other people to want to be around us, We need to be, upbeat, positive. We need to be fine. How many times do people ask you how you're doing? And maybe you're not doing great, and you say, I'm fine, how are you? We know how to act fine, even if that's not how we're feeling inside, and we know that we need, we should go deal with our stuff on our own. We're not bothering anybody else. Another one is to be strong for others. It's like when I'm trying to think of a good example in my life, because I wasn't strong for others I kind of was when my mom died, because my brother, did not want to deal with anything, so I got to deal with it. I got to go through her apartment and sell all the things and deal with all the stuff. Well, he didn't do anything and went back to France, really. That's how it felt to me at the time. But, to be strong for others when loss occurs, so for instance, fortunately, I have not experienced this yet, but I can foresee, the eventual future, like when one of my in-laws eventually dies. The expectation will probably be for me to be strong for my husband, to be there for him. And I suppose he was strong for me when my mom passed, right? We feel like that's what we have to do. We have to put on this front where we just, we're going to fuck up and do the things that need to be done. And there's nothing wrong with getting things done that need to get done, but feeling what you're feeling and actually experiencing the grief, you're not going to fall apart. You're not going to not do, what needs to be done. Another one is to stay busy. Loss occurs, we fill our lives up with other things. I know that when I was laid off from my job, I was very productive in my job, and so I was in that go, make lists, do insane amounts of things in small amounts of time in my life. But I did so much stuff around the house that summer. I had so many projects. I had, until that kind of finally wound down, I was like, oh yes, I feel terrible that I have lost my job. Now what do I do with my life? That urge there to stay busy, it's like if you can distract yourself for long enough and let enough time go by, then maybe you'll somehow magically feel better, which brings us to the last one, which is give it time. You've heard that time heals all wounds. And the thing is, time alone doesn't heal. It just doesn't. If you think about any of the losses that have brought you here, how many of them happened more than 5 years ago? More than 10 years ago? 15? Are they still there? Do they still hurt? If time was enough, then it seems like it should feel better than it does by now. An example the Grief Recovery Institute likes to use that I borrow is, say which I'm not going to do, but say I fell off the stage and I broke my leg. Would you just go, don't worry, Joanna, it'll get better in time?
No.
Don't feel bad. Here, have a cookie.
No.
You wouldn't, right?
No.
You would, you'd call an ambulance. I really hope somebody would call 911. Please, somebody would call 911, right? So you would do something, because we know how to deal with medical emergencies. We call experts and we say this person is something is wrong, fix it. We would do something with it. And, so that's time plus the right action. They take me to surgery, they fix things up, and then in a couple weeks or so, I start doing, physical therapy, and I do these right actions over the course of time, and I heal. Time on its own, not going to do it. But these losses that we experience, these losses I experienced, up until my adulthood, but and I then continue to experience more. Time didn't heal those. Time on its own surely should have healed, that loss from, say, my parents' divorce or from an assault when I was 7, and it didn't. It's something that is only now healing because I now have the tools to actually heal it. So one more note about the unhelpful comments that people give us. There's a couple reasons that this happens. One is because they just don't know what to do, because they've learned all the same like useless information about grief that we have in terms of actually how to heal it. They're using the same inadequate tools. They've got their hammer and saw and stuff, and they're still trying to paint the room, and it doesn't work. And so that's what they have to offer us. They're just offering what they know. They're not necessarily trying. They're usually not trying to hurt in any way. And those comments are true to a certain extent. Intellectually, they're true, right? My mom's not in pain anymore. That's true. Her passing was quick. It was 3 weeks from the time that she was diagnosed to the time that she died from liver cancer. That's true. So it's a mercy that it was quick. That is true. And they're true, they're true intellectually. But we don't feel grief in our brains. We feel grief in our hearts. And they don't address what is hurting in your heart. And that's why they feel painful. That's why it feels so painful when you hear that kind of thing, because it's not getting to what is really hurting. And there are even things that we will tell ourselves as well. We try to rationalize these things. We try to make it better for ourselves, but it's not addressing what is really going on within our hearts. So when we don't know how to heal from grief, one of the things what happens is it stays unresolved and it builds up. It continues to accumulate. And then we have kind of the pressures and the stresses of life that are going on around us that are also, pushing in on us. And this grief just accumulates. And then when another loss occurs, because this is life and loss is going to keep occurring, there's no magical formula, secret that's going to stop that from happening. We feel all those other unhealed losses that are still within us. It reverberates them, it resonates against them, and all of those painful bits within us, we go, oh yes, those are all still there too, and that's why it feels so incredibly overwhelming. In terms of how this then looks in your life, this unresolved grief and loss will show up in ways such as having reduced concentration, disrupted sleeping patterns, depression, lack of energy, not being present or being out of the moment, finding yourself, drifting off, going other places, having low-grade anger, perhaps at the world, being constantly irritated, isolation and isolating yourself away from other people since they don't really get your loss anyway and aren't doing anything to help you. Feeling stuck, sometimes just feeling stuck in your life, knowing that it just doesn't feel right, but you don't know how to move forward out of it. Engaging in behaviors that you don't really want to do, or engaging in them kind of too much. And that could be as simple as going, oh, I'm just going to watch this TV show for 20 minutes. And then you find yourself there, 2 hours later still watching TV. Yeah. For me, it's checking Facebook before I go to bed. So I'm, guilty as anyone. It's like, oh, I'll just check quickly, scroll. I'm like, what am I doing? Because I'm feeling uncomfortable. I'm feeling stuff that I don't like. Something doesn't quite feel right. And so I go to do this thing. And illness is an accident. So unresolved grief can show up in your body, literally, as illness. And it can show up as accidents because you have reduced concentration. And so you're more likely to fall or to get in a car accident and that kind of thing. And in terms of the behaviors that we begin to engage in, grief recovery calls them short-term energy relieving behaviors. I think mostly because it makes a nice acronym called STIRBs. They used to call it short-term feeling relieving behaviors, which I personally like better, but you can't really say STIRBs very well. So these are behaviors that we engage in because they help distract us from the uncomfortable things that we're feeling that we don't know how to deal with because we don't have the right tools to deal with it. So some of these, and you probably know what some of these are. Food is one of them. Here, have a cookie. Alcohol, prescriptions or street drugs, fantasy, whatever kind of fantasy you like, TV, movies, books, whatever, video games, social media, shopping, which we like to humorously call retail therapy, anger. Sometimes being angry is a good distraction for what you're really feeling underneath. Exercise, sex, isolation, and workaholism, some of which is the keeping busy. And so the problem with these stubs, with these short-term energy relieving behaviors, is that they're short-term. And once you stop doing them, you still have the unresolved grief and loss that you haven't dealt with. And unfortunately, while you're in the process of doing them, you may be hurting yourself and or the people in your life. So some of them, done in moderation, exercise can be a good thing. Going for a walk or a run, and that is one of mine. When I'm feeling all like, oh, inside, I'm just out the door. I just like go. And it's not the most terrible thing in the world to go, for a walk, but done to excess or done to avoid what's really going on and then still not dealing with it, it doesn't resolve what you were trying to distract yourself from to begin with. So what can you do? Now that you know this, what can you do? This is the hopefully what you can do part of the talk. So recovery from loss is achieved by taking a series of small and correct actions. And I'm going to tell you what the actions are. I'd be lovely to have them displayed up here. But the first one is awareness of what loss and grief is. By coming here tonight and learning more about what loss and grief is. You've already done the first one, so there you go. The second one is awareness of the tools that do not work, of understanding that the tools that you've learned to deal with grief and loss are not the right tools and are not effective tools. So that's the second one, and you've done that one too. So you are 2 steps ahead of everybody else who is not here right now. The third one is discovering your own losses, is taking an honest look at what you've experienced in your life and the losses that you've experienced and looking at them and going, yep, these are my losses. And this sounds like it could be really depressing, and it's not actually. I found it, and most of the people I've worked with have actually enjoyed doing this, that they to really look and go, yeah, this is my life. A lot of things make sense now. The fourth one is discovering what relationships are incomplete for you, because loss happens in relationship. It all happens in relationship. My losses are my relationship with my older brother, my relationship with my mom, with my dad, with the person who assaulted me, with my stepmom, with my country, with my friends, with all of those are in relationship to other people. Loss is always occurring within relationships, within the context of relationships. The fifth step is accepting responsibility for your part in the incompleteness that you're experiencing, which doesn't mean it's your fault, which doesn't mean blaming yourself, but it is accepting responsibility for it being unresolved, because you didn't have the tools. It's okay, right? It's okay that it's unresolved. The sixth step is identifying what you need to communicate and process through the heart about that relationship. And so this isn't communicating to the person. This is really more about how you process, how you realize what is unresolved, and how you identify what those things are that you would need to own up to, the things that you would apologize for. Like with my relationship with my mom, one of those things was apologizing for how I was as a teenager. I was not the easiest child. I did not respect any rules. If I didn't like them, I kind of just did whatever it was that I wanted to do. That was one of my things that made the relationship more difficult. I can honestly say, yeah, I could have done this a bit differently. Another aspect of that is forgiveness. And so I will say the dreaded F word, forgiveness, which is really a gift that you give to yourself. Forgiveness is really all about you. It's got nothing to do with the other person in many ways, because it's about how you find your own freedom, how you let go of the pain, essentially. It's about letting go of the pain. It's not about condoning what anybody has done or hasn't done, or saying that it's okay. It's a step that you decide to take so that you can experience emotional freedom from the stuff that's happened to you. The seventh step is communicating those things. And in the grief recovery method, you do that. You write them and you express them to another living being who would be your partner in the process. And then the last step, the eighth step, is saying goodbye to the pain. It's being willing to say goodbye to the pain and let go of it and move forward. So the grief recovery method is the way that I lead people through this process. It is a doable program that leads you through the steps to recovery from your loss. It has been used for about 40 years now, I think. It's approaching its 40th anniversary, I think, by about 500,000 people worldwide. So it has been going on for a really long time. It is super effective, and it's actually quite, I want to say, it's not easy, but it's clear, right? It is very clear steps. If you do this, you do this, you do this, you do this, oh, look, you're done now with this relationship. And it really does work that way. It almost seems too simple and easy in some ways to be as effective as it is. But it's how I have healed from my losses and how I am still healing from loss. So I started doing grief recovery work for myself about a year ago. I think I got, this is the book that it's based on, the Grief Recovery Handbook. I think I got a copy of this book December 2017. And since then, I don't know how many relationships I've completed now. A lot of them. I've done a lot of them. And it has made such a huge difference in my life. Just over a year ago, as I still have, fibromyalgia, I still have CFIDs, I had I had a couple bad relapses, and I was also diagnosed with adrenal fatigue and post-viral syndrome and like a resurgence of Epstein-Barr virus, and I was just out. I was done in terms of my energy. I couldn't get out of bed. I had to pretty much close my business and stop working and stop seeing clients. And I used to do a lot here and participate here in the leadership, song leading, and I just had to stop doing it. I couldn't do it anymore. And I didn't know what I was going to do or how I was going to fix this or get better, And I knew that because I kept getting triggered by the Me Too movement in 2017, fall of 2017, fall of 2018. And I tried to stay I keep myself from it a bit, but still it was really, really triggering for me. And I went, oh yeah, I have my stuff I have to deal with. I have to heal the stuff that keeps coming up for me. And I found the Grief Recovery Handbook and I started working through it. And it has made such a huge difference for me. It's made a difference. I did my mom first, right? You can't go wrong starting with your parents. It's true in grief recovery, like it is pretty much in anything. And I don't even know how to describe it, but I just felt so much lighter. And I remember looking at myself in May or June of last year when I was about 30 pounds heavier than I am now and going, wow, I feel so much lighter inside. Like I just felt so much lighter. I'd stand on the scale and go, that doesn't reflect what's going on with me. And I changed my diet and I lost 32 pounds. So there you go. Grief recovery is not guaranteed to help you lose weight at all. But you never know. Because it allowed things to shift inside of me, I think, to help my kind of outer reality reflect how I feel inside. And I'm working again, and I'm I was in a car accident last Monday, so I didn't go to the gym this last week, which I'm annoyed about. Another loss though, right? I know what's lost now. I know what's grief. I know how to emotionally process this stuff in a better and healthier way. But I've been working out and doing chin-ups and things that, I don't know, my body wants exercise. It's amazing. And part of that, I do really believe that part of that, a huge part of that is because of the emotional work and the emotional healing that I've been experiencing by using this process to look at my losses, to look at the relationships that have been unresolved and painful for me and releasing that pain. I just don't have it anymore. And stuff will still come up, there was something after completed the relationship with my dad, which has always been a really painful relationship for me, where I never felt like I got what I needed. Like I was able to communicate with him in like this emotionally like free way inside me. I didn't like if there wasn't all that like weird stuff, you know, when you like call somebody or email somebody and you've got all this like ooh within you, it just wasn't there anymore. And then when something did come up around Christmas time, I was able to identify what it was and deal with it and let go of it. And I went, wow, well, that's amazing. For Mother's Day last year, I actually emailed my stepmom like a happy Mother's Day email and just shared some happy memories from my childhood. Like the happy memories actually came up to the surface and I could say thanks for whatever very sincerely. And shifts like that have happened for me that I never thought could possibly have happened. So the way the grief recovery method works, specifically the formats that it works in is you can do the work one-on-one with a grief recovery specialist where you meet one-on-one for 7 weeks for an hour each time and we go through the process and I lead you through it. You can do it in a support group where there is a maximum of 15 people and we meet once a week for 8 weeks for 2 hours and you're mostly partnered with one other person throughout the process so you're not like sharing, because I personally would not like to share my stuff with like, well, I am now, I guess. I share all my stuff with everybody, whatever. Well, because it's fine, right? The things that I've shared with you, it's okay because they're not unresolved for me anymore. Or if they are, I'm actively working on them and resolving them, and I know that I'm okay. So it's not painful to share them. But I would not have liked that, you know, a year or two ago, would not have been up for wanting to share everything with a bunch of people, but the way that it's done is that you're partnered with one or sometimes 2 other people, so that it is that absolutely confidential, you know, sharing with somebody else. And you can also take the do it yourself, the DIY approach, if you want to. It's what I did, stubbornly independent person, got this book, ignored the instructions to go find a partner. I said, no, I'm going to do it on my own, because grieve alone, good at that one. So I did it on my own, and I completed the process with my therapist. And so, hey, if you want to do it that way, personally, I would support you doing it however you want to do it, because for me, it is about sharing this with people so that they can find the healing that they need. I'll take questions in just a minute, okay? So the 8-week grief recovery support group, the next one starts next Monday, January 21st. It's from 7 to 9 p.m. It's not a drop-in group. It is an 8-week commitment. You do need to come for like all 8 weeks. If you miss like 1 or 2, it can be okay. Some you need to make up though. We will be working with the Grief Recovery Handbook. You will get weekly homework to do every week, and that is a very important part of the process. Like I said, you'll be partnered like with 1, sometimes 2 other people. You know, if there's an odd number of people, there's 1 group of 3. Just talk about the vulnerable stuff, so you're not sharing it with everybody. There's absolute confidentiality within the group, and it is a safe space to heal. The cost, since people always like to know how much stuff costs, which I completely understand because it matters. So the way that the way that I'm offering this is on a pay from your heart basis, is what I call it, because I want this to be as available and as accessible to as many people as possible. So I ask for a range between $99 and $399 for the 8 weeks, and for you to kind of go, okay, what works for me? What works for me financially, you know, realistically, logistically, what works for you in your heart? What does your heart say? I trust your hearts, honestly. I trust your hearts to know what is doable for you and what feels right to you. I do have a minimums because it covers the cost of the book and the rental here and, you know, all the copies and pieces of paper I give you and a little bit from my time and my training as well, because I will lead you through the whole process. What you get out of that is you will resolve 1 incomplete relationship. We will take you through 1 relationship that feels painful to you right now and is affecting your life and the quality of your life and your happiness and your inner freedom. And you will complete the pain of that relationship. You'll also learn the tools that you need to be able to address any other relationships that also feel incomplete for you. You will feel lighter and freer inside. I've not yet met anybody who says that they do not feel better after going through this process, and sometimes people feel in a tremendous amount better, and before they're even finished with it, that throughout the course of the 8 weeks, they go, oh, like something has shifted inside me. I feel different. I feel lighter. I feel better. And you will know how to recover from grief and loss, because loss will continue to happen in your life. Loss continues to happen in my life. And I'm dealing with loss right now in terms of one of my kids is facing some mental health challenges, which is kind of terrifying for me as their parent. And I know it, and I recognize it. I can recognize what is happening, and I can take care of myself, and I can walk through it because I have the tools to work through it now. When, a car runs a stop sign and drives into me, so I'm going to get a massage, which is what happened last week. I'm not bitter. I am just a tiny bit. Oh, no. I was going to take care of myself, people. Anyway, I know, right? This is the loss of my 19-year-old, I think, minivan, not person, sorry. Didn't want to mislead you with my little brain going off somewhere. So my minivan is probably going to be totaled. I've been driving for the last 8.5 years. And so there's not the loss of a person, but there's a little bit of loss there. There's loss of the fear around, does this mean more loss of health for me? My God, I've worked so hard to be healthy again. I know what's going on. I'm better equipped to deal with the loss I'm going to experience in my life. So what is recovery from grief? Recovery means feeling better. Recovery is being able to enjoy fond memories without them turning painful. Recovery is knowing that it's okay to feel sad from time to time and to talk about those feelings, even if it makes the people around you uncomfortable to talk about those feelings, to talk about how you're feeling anyway. Recovery means having the skills to deal with loss. And recovery is finding new meaning for living without the fear of being hurt again. It lets you go into new relationships without being afraid of being hurt. It lets you almost have a clean slate in many ways with your current relationships with people in your life that have been difficult. Because emotionally you've cleared up all the stuff that you've been carrying around with you all this time. So thank you so much for being here this evening. However you choose to move forward with recovering from your loss, I support you. If you are interested in being part of our 8-week support group that is starting next Monday, please let me know. I will have a sign-up sheet for it in the back after this. Because it is limited to 15 people, I am asking for a $50 deposit to hold your spot so that I know you're coming and that I had more people show up for the last one than I anticipated, so I know I need to make sure I have the right number of books and that I don't have more people, than I can have, if that makes sense. So, yeah, did you want to ask any questions? You had a question.
Yeah, so the question I have is grief, can you still grieve the loss of a loved one that's still alive? It's just really, sometimes I find it difficult, with the strange relationships or, so is that something that you could work on in this kind of a situation?
Yeah, so the question is, can you grieve the loss of a relationship with somebody that's still alive, perhaps an estranged relationship? And yes, you definitely can. In many ways, my relationship with my dad is kind of estrangement. We don't have really a relationship at this point, and it's been very painful for me. And you can use the grief recovery method to heal what's incomplete and to let go of the pain of that, so that maybe you still don't have a relationship, but it's not painful for you, or maybe you are able to have some kind of a relationship at whatever extent you can have, and it's not painful for you. Does that make sense? You have a question?
In the process of because we could all have a innumerable amount of loss. in the process, do we like, in the first session or group, do we kind of go and focus on trying to figure out which one is the most important or one that we want to be able to do? Because, I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, and I have that one and I have that one.
Yeah.
And, oh my gosh, and then, that kind of
Yeah.
thing. And I want to be able to know that I'm addressing and have enough time to know so that I don't waste the 8 sessions. You know what I'm
Yes.
saying?
So the question is, if we have lots of losses, when and how do you figure out which one to work on? So the answer is yes, you will figure it out not the first week though. You don't have to figure that out the first week. And sometimes the loss that somebody will go into doing this work thinking that they're going to work on is not the one they end up deciding to do for a variety of reasons, either because they realize there's a more painful loss or because they go, this loss is too painful, I cannot deal with this, I'm going to do this other one right now, or because you decide to start with your parents, because, you can't blame everything on your mom, why not? So on week, I can't remember which week it is, but it's the 3rd or 4th week, I think. The first you learn more about kind of grief and loss and why, you learn more about the myths of grief and the behaviors that people tend to do. And you get to talk about, that and develop closeness and rapport within the group. And then you look at the losses that you've experienced in your life. And then from there you go, okay, I'm going to choose this loss, this relationship to complete. And by doing so, you learn the tools to then take that to complete any other relationship that you want to.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. In the back?
I think you just answered my question.
Okay.
I guess the other sort of question I have is about, you said you wanted $50 down.
Yes.
You require that today?
So I realize it's kind of like a out of the blue thing, or like a pink promise maybe.
You have a credit card swiper?
I can take credit cards. I forgot to bring my swipey thing, but I can do a credit card. Or just come talk to me. Like if that's not if you're like, yes, I definitely want to do this, and the deposit isn't possible, like right this instant, just talk to me. I'm like a really reasonable human being. And the same also is true for, generally, it works great if you pay the rest of the amount at the first class. And if that doesn't work for you, just come talk to me. We can figure it out. Like I'm required to actually charge money, but that's not what this is about for me. Like this has just been such a powerful, profound change for me. You both will get to go, don't worry. That I really want to share with people. Yeah, well, go ahead.
We work together, all 3 of us, so we're just like.
Mine's really fast and easy. I just want everyone to know that there's only 14 spots left.
That's awesome.
And I want you to know there's only 13, okay? What about the one-on-one? How much is that? And is that like, do you bill insurance like a therapist, or is it, how does that?
So it's self-pay. I can't bill insurance. And so that is, again, something that we could talk about.
Do you think it's better to do it in a group, or?
I think it really depends on the person.
Yeah.
There are some people, like I've had clients, one-on-one clients, that are like, there is no way I'm doing a group. Absolutely not gonna happen, never, ever, ever. I'm like, that's fine, no problem. That's why we have this couple different plans. And then there are some people who really like the energy of a group, who like going through something kind of in a cohort to have that energy, that kind of love surrounding them, that support. So whatever's right for you is I trust you to know yourselves and to know what feels best to you.
That's right.
So did we make the check to you then, or?
Yes. Sweet. Loves me. Yes.
I know you went on to do further training, but did you feel like after that and maybe having a group that, I don't know if the word is success rate, but I'm thinking like if you do it yourself,
Mm-hmm.
there's the pros and cons to that.
So if you just decide to get the book, say I'm just going to do it myself. So it kind of depends on how committed you are to doing the work, I think, and how determined you are to keep going when you get to the hard bit. The book says find a partner. Like just another person, a friend, a colleague, a
What about?
random stranger, I don't know, just find somebody else, right? I mean, put up ad on Craigslist, say, I want to do grief recovery work. However you find them, it's completely up to you. Because it gives you accountability, because you know that when you both show up then to that meeting, you're each gonna do the work and the sharing. Whereas when you're just doing it for yourself, there's less accountability. This, for me, this just worked. This just clicked, and I went, oh, this is what I've been looking for. This makes sense to me. I had never followed the instructions in any nonfiction book ever until now. I read the thing, I get to the instructions, right? And they go, okay, now sit down and meditate and picture the lotus opening or whatever it is, or journal your fears about whatever. I'm like, yeah, it's not gonna happen. And I put the book down and I've read, the first like 10% of it, and I feel guilty. Or bad, because I'm like, I should really finish reading this book, but I just can't do it. This book, I don't know what the difference was for me, but I read it, I got to the first instructions, and I went, I understand those. Even though writing about dealing with whatever grief and difficult emotions can be overwhelming, for some reason for me they were clear enough that I went, yeah, I can do that, and I did it, and then I did the next thing, and the next thing, and the next thing, and I trained with my therapist how to be my grief recovery specialist. So, I mean, you can, and if you try it and you're like, I can't do this, this is overwhelming, then you could always come see me for a one-on-one session or do a group later on if you wanted to, or find a partner to partner with. You had a question about whether to do it with a husband or not. It's generally best not to have somebody that you're that emotionally close
That's
to,
what I was thinking.
especially if the relationship that you're working on is somebody that they know. Because
They didn't know him as well as I did, so.
but it's generally
Still
best
can.
not to, it's best if there's kind of emotional
Yeah.
distance, because it's one of the things that happens in the group, or if you're working with me one-on-one, is that we don't analyze the relationship, we don't criticize it, we don't judge it, we don't offer our opinions about it.
Okay.
And it's done within the very safe context and confines of the group. That's when you talk about it, you share, the other person listens, they share, you listen. There's no commentary. And so if you're in a close relationship, it's kind of hard for that not to bleed over into the rest of your relationship. Where they go, hey, you know that thing you told me about Bob? I was thinking. And that's not really a helpful thing for you, for your
That's what I was thinking,
feeling
yeah.
of loss. So,
Thank you.
sure. Any other questions? No? All right. So I will be in the back with the sign-up sheet. Thank you all so much for being here. It takes an act of courage to come and listen and talk about grief and loss. I'm so proud of all of you. Thank you.
That's